Growing up, I always thought love was something you earned. I thought if I brought home good grades, stayed out of trouble, and helped Mom clean the kitchen when no one else offered, I'd get the same warmth my brother received so effortlessly. But I was wrong. From the moment we were kids, my brother Jason was the golden child. If he got a B, it was great effort. If I got an A, it was why not an A+. If he crashed the family car, it was boys will be boys. If I spoke my mind, it was don't talk back. At first, I didn't question it. I thought maybe I just needed to try harder, be quieter, more helpful, more perfect. But no matter what I did, I was invisible compared to Jason. He was the son my parents always bragged about. Smart, charming, ambitious, the one they said would take care of the family business. Meanwhile, I was the backup plan, the quiet daughter who would probably marry someone successful one day. I tried not to let it get to me. When Jason went off to college, my parents helped him with tuition, rent, even a car. I went to community college and worked 2 jobs to pay my own way. Still, I called them every week, asked how they were doing, told them about work, my goals, my plans. They barely listened. But I kept trying, because that's what daughters do, right? You keep showing up, even when you're treated like an afterthought. Years passed. Jason graduated, moved back home, and joined Dad's real estate company. I stayed in the city, working for a tech startup. I climbed my way up slowly. Project manager, then senior project manager, and finally team lead. I was proud of myself, but every time I shared something good, it was dismissed. Must be nice to work in an office, Mom would say. You're lucky you don't have real pressure like your brother, Dad would add. I learned to stop telling them things. Then one day, my parents called out of the blue. They sounded excited, a rare tone I hadn't heard from them in years. They said, Jason bought a house. We helped him out a bit. Isn't that great? Helped him out? I asked. Like alone? There was a pause. Then Mom said no. We gifted him $230,000. It's a good investment in the family's future. My stomach dropped. $230,000. That was more money than I'd ever seen in my life. I tried to swallow my emotions, but my voice shook when I asked, why him? Why not split it between us? Mom sighed. Oh, honey, you know Jason has a family now. He needs it more. You're doing fine. You don't need help. That was the moment something inside me broke, because it wasn't about the money. Not really. It was about what it represented. Every time they'd chosen him over me, every time they made me feel small, they didn't just gift him money. They confirmed what I had always feared, that I was never truly one of them. That night, I sat alone in my apartment and thought about every sacrifice I'd made to earn their love. The holidays I'd flown home just to be ignored. The birthdays I remembered, even when they forgot mine. The phone calls I made that were never returned. And now, after years of giving everything, I had nothing left to give. So I stopped calling. No texts. No visits, no updates. It felt strange at first, like I was betraying them. But slowly, that guilt turned into peace. For the first time, I didn't have to beg for attention. For the first time, the silence wasn't painful. It was powerful. Meanwhile, life went on. My career kept growing. I moved into a better apartment, took solo trips, made friends who felt more like family than my own blood ever did. Months passed, then years. And just when I thought I was free, my past came knocking again, in the form of a call from Jason himself. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the best of me. Hey sis, he said, in that same confident voice I'd always hated. Mom and Dad want to talk to you. It's urgent. About what? He paused. They're selling the family house. They want everyone together for one last dinner before it goes. I almost laughed. After everything, they wanted a family dinner? But something inside me whispered, go. Not to reconnect, but to finally close the chapter. So I said, sure, I'll be there. That dinner would change everything, but not in the way any of us expected. Because this time, I wasn't the quiet, desperate daughter trying to earn love. I was the woman they underestimated, and they were about to find out what that mistake would cost them. The night I drove back to my parents' house, the same one I grew up in. I felt a knot twisting in my stomach. It wasn't fear, not anymore. It was closure waiting to happen. I hadn't been there in over 3 years. The house looked smaller, almost unfamiliar. The perfect lawn, the warm porch lights, the faint smell of Mom's cooking floating through the open window. Everything looked the same. And yet, I felt like a stranger stepping onto someone else's front porch. When I walked in, Mom's face lit up for half a second, then softened into that polite, uncomfortable smile she always used when she didn't know what to say. "Sweetheart, you made it," she said, like it hadn't been years of silence. "Yeah," I said. Thought it was time. Dad stood at the kitchen counter, cutting roast beef like he was performing for an audience. Jason was already seated, scrolling through his phone while his wife, Emily, smiled at me. A sweet smile that didn't reach her eyes. The whole thing felt rehearsed. Dinner started the way all awkward reunions do, with forced small talk and fake laughter. They asked about work, about my apartment, about city life, I answered politely, keeping my tone neutral. Then, halfway through the meal, Dad cleared his throat. "So," he began, "we're glad you could join us. We've been thinking a lot about family lately. You know how important it is to stay connected," Mom chimed in. "Your father's health has been not perfect, and we want to make sure everyone's taken care of when we're gone." Jason looked up then, curious. "You mean the estate?" I stayed silent. I already knew where this was going. Mom smiled at him. "Yes, we've updated the will. We thought it was only fair to make sure things go to the one who's been closest to home." There it was. The same pattern again. The same favoritism dressed up as fairness. I set my fork down quietly. "So you're leaving everything to Jason?" Dad didn't even flinch. "Well, most of it, yes. He's been taking care of us. He visits, he helps around. You've been busy. Busy." That was their word for independence. I took a slow breath. You know what's funny? I used to cry about this kind of thing. The favoritism, the money, the constant comparisons. But not anymore. They exchanged glances. "Honey, this isn't personal," Mom said softly. "It's just practical." "No, Mom," I said, looking straight at her. "It's always been personal." Jason laughed lightly, trying to break the tension. "Come on, sis. Don't make this awkward. It's not like you're struggling. You've got a good job, right? You don't need any of this." I turned to him and smiled. "You're right. I don't." That surprised them. For a moment, the air went still. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small white envelope. "In fact," I said, "I came here to give you something." Jason frowned. "What's this?" I nodded at the envelope. "Open it." He tore it open and froze. His face went pale. Inside was a printed screenshot, the property listing for the very house we were sitting in, marked sold, with a closing date 2 weeks earlier. "You bought it?" he said in disbelief. Mom's fork clattered against her plate. "What?" Dad's eyes widened. "That's not possible. The sale hasn't even—" "Oh, it has," I interrupted calmly. "You see, your real estate agent made the rookie mistake of listing it under your company's name, the same one I've been quietly investing in for 2 years. Jason blinked. "You, what?" I leaned back in my chair. "Yeah. Remember when you bragged about expanding your real estate portfolio? Well, one of those small firms you acquired had a silent partner. That was me. You could have heard a pin drop." Mom's hand went to her chest. "You're saying you own this house?" I nodded slowly. "Technically, yes. When you put it on the market, the offer went straight to me through my business account. So congratulations, everyone. You just sold your home to your daughter, the so-called failure." Jason's jaw clenched. "You're bluffing," I smiled faintly. "Am I? Go ahead, call your agent." He did. Right there at the table. I watched the color drain from his face as his agent confirmed every word. Mom looked shattered. "Why would you do this to us?" I looked her dead in the eye. "Because I wanted to see how it feels to finally be in control." Silence. Dad shook his head slowly. "We gave you everything." "No," I cut him off. "You gave him everything. You gave me lessons in rejection, in being overlooked, in being treated like a ghost in my own family. And guess what? That taught me more than any gift ever could. Jason slammed his hand on the table. You think this makes you better than us? I stood up, my voice calm. No, it makes me free from you. Mom whispered, tears in her eyes. You can't just walk away from family. I met her gaze. You walked away from me a long time ago. I grabbed my coat, turned toward the door, and paused. Don't worry, I'm not kicking you out. You can stay here until the closing date. After that, well, I'm sure Jason will figure something out. And with that, I walked out, leaving them in the same house they once called home, now realizing it belonged to the daughter they never believed in. As I got into my car, my hands shook, not from anger but from release. For the first time in my life, I felt equal. No, stronger, because revenge doesn't always come with fire or shouting. Sometimes it comes with silence, a signature, and a smile. And for me, that was enough. The next morning, my phone started buzzing before the sun even came up. 12 missed calls from Mom, 6 from Dad, and 3 long, angry texts from Jason. I ignored every single one. But then the doorbell rang. When I looked through the peephole, there they were, my parents, standing on my doorstep, looking more desperate than I'd ever seen them. Dad was holding a folder full of papers. Mom's eyes were red and swollen. I took a long breath before opening the door. Wow, I said calmly. Didn't expect visitors so early. Mom stepped forward immediately. Please, honey, we need to talk. I crossed my arms. About what? The house? The will? The fact that your favorite child just sold your home to the failure? Dad sighed heavily. We made a mistake, all right? We didn't mean to hurt you. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, you didn't mean to. You just accidentally gave my brother $230,000 and called me a disappointment for choosing my own path? He rubbed his forehead. You have to understand. Jason was going through a hard time. He needed that money for his business. Right, I said. And when I asked for help starting mine, you told me to get a real job. Silence. Mom finally spoke up, her voice trembling. We didn't think you'd make it on your own. You were so stubborn. You wanted to do everything without help. I laughed under my breath. And you punished me for it? Dad's tone hardened. You can't just buy our house out from under us. That's not family. That's betrayal. I looked him straight in the eye. You're right. It's not family. It's business. Something you taught Jason well. He flinched, but didn't respond. Then Mom did something I didn't expect. She broke down crying, right there on my doorstep. I don't want to lose you again, she sobbed. I can't. You're still my daughter. For a moment, I almost felt that old instinct, to comfort her, to make peace, to be the one who forgives. But then I remembered every time they dismissed me, every time they said, Jason's just more responsible, or you'll understand when you're older. I wasn't older now. I was wiser. I'm not trying to hurt you, I said softly. I'm just done being the one who gets hurt. Dad stepped forward. So what happens now? You kick us out? You let your own parents become homeless? I frowned. You have options, Dad. Jason has a whole portfolio of properties, remember? He can take you in. You chose him. Stick with your choice. The words hit him like a slap. Mom looked up at me, tears streaking her face. Please, don't do this. I shook my head. You did this. You created a family where one child mattered more than the other. I'm just cleaning up the mess. They stood there, speechless. Eventually, Dad muttered something about talking to a lawyer, and they left. I closed the door behind them and leaned against it, letting the silence sink in. It didn't feel as satisfying as I thought it would. It felt heavy. That night, I went out to the balcony and stared at the city lights. I remembered being the kid who always tried to win their approval. The one who brought home good grades, stayed out of trouble, and still somehow wasn't enough. And I realized something. The revenge wasn't the point. The freedom was. Still, the story didn't end there. A week later, I got a call from Jason. Look, he said, his tone colder than ever. I don't know what game you're playing, but Mom and Dad are a mess. You've gone too far this time. Too far? I repeated. Funny, coming from the guy who took $230,000 and still called me a failure. He scoffed. You don't get it. That money was an investment. I actually used it to build something. Oh, I know, I said. I just happened to own a piece of that something. Check your email. There was a long pause. Then I heard the click of a mouse on the other end and his breathing changed. You bought into my company? Not just bought in, I said calmly. Acquired. 41% ownership, to be exact. Enough to have voting rights, he exploded. Are you insane? You can't just— I can, I said. And I did. For years, Jason had used Dad's money to build a flashy real estate company. All talk, no discipline. But what he didn't know was that when his investors started to bail, I'd quietly bought out their shares through a third-party fund. The same company he thought was mystery capital saving his business was actually mine. I'd let him dig his own hole. Now, I was standing at the edge, holding the rope. Here's the deal, I said. You'll sell back the house to me at market value and you'll pay Mom and Dad rent until they move. You'll also pay back the $200,000 to $30,000 in monthly installments to their account. He laughed bitterly. You're blackmailing me? No, I said softly. I'm giving you a chance to do what's right, something you've never done before. Jason was quiet for a long moment. You really think this makes you the hero? No, I replied. It just means I finally stopped being the victim. He hung up. A few days later, I got an email from his lawyer. He'd agreed to the terms. No apology, no conversation, just business. And I was okay with that. Because some people will never understand the pain they cause until they feel the consequences. A month passed. My parents sold the house. Jason made the first payment, and for the first time, the power dynamic shifted completely. They tried calling again, but I didn't answer. Then one evening, Mom left a voicemail. Her voice was soft, almost broken. Sweetheart, I don't know if you'll even listen to this. I just wanted to say, we're sorry. We didn't see what we were doing. We thought love meant giving to the one who needed help. But maybe we forgot that you needed it too. Not money, just to be seen. I hope one day you'll forgive us. I listened to that message more than once, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel anger, just peace. Because I'd finally realized something. You don't need an apology to heal. You just need closure. It had been 2 quiet months since I'd heard from anyone in my family. No texts, no calls, not even a guilt-laden voicemail. For the first time in years, my life felt peaceful. I was finally investing in my own company, hiring people who believed in my vision, and waking up each morning without the crushing weight of family expectations pressing on my chest. But peace never lasts when pride is bruised. One Thursday afternoon, as I wrapped up a client call, my phone buzzed. It was a message from a friend. Hey, is everything okay with your parents? Saw something weird on Facebook. My stomach dropped. When I opened the link, there it was. A long, dramatic post written by Jason. He'd painted himself as the victim. Some people will do anything for revenge, even destroy their own family. My sister manipulated my parents and took away everything they built. I've stayed quiet, but the truth needs to come out. It had hundreds of comments. People from our hometown were chiming in, sympathizing with him, calling me greedy and ungrateful. I felt a familiar mix of fury and heartbreak rise in my chest. He was doing it again, twisting the story, playing the innocent son, while making me look like the villain. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. I'd learned my lesson about reacting emotionally. This time I wouldn't shout. I'd strategize, so I called my lawyer. I figured this might happen, she said calmly. Defamation's tricky, but if he's spreading false claims about your business or finances, we can respond officially. I nodded. No, I don't want to take it to court yet. I want to end it, once and for all, she smirked slightly. Then you're going to need proof. Real proof. And as fate would have it, I already had it. You see, while everyone thought I'd cut ties with my family, I'd quietly kept track of the money trail. Jason had been using our parents' names to secure more loans, and he'd even listed them as guarantors, without their full consent. I had the documents, emails, bank statements, everything. For years, he'd built his image on deception. Now I had the receipts to expose it, but instead of going public, I decided to do something even better, something that would end the cycle permanently. I called my parents. Mom, Dad, I said, my voice steady. We need to talk. In person, they hesitated but agreed. We met that Sunday at a neutral spot, a small diner halfway between my place and theirs. When they walked in, Mom looked nervous. Dad looked tired, older somehow. I pushed a folder across the table. Before you say anything, I said, just look at this. Dad opened it. His face drained of color as he flipped through the pages. Mom covered her mouth in shock. These are Jason's business filings, I explained. He's been using your names for loans. If he defaults, you're responsible, Mom whispered. No, he wouldn't. He would, I said quietly. And he did. Dad slammed the folder shut. Why are you showing us this? To hurt him? To hurt us again? No, I said softly. To protect you. You still think he's the golden boy, but he's been putting you at risk while blaming me for everything. They both sat in silence. Mom finally spoke. So, what do you want us to do? I met her eyes. Nothing. I'm not here for revenge anymore. I just want you to see the truth and stop pretending it doesn't exist. Then I stood up. I'm done trying to prove myself to this family. I've already proved it to myself. As I turned to leave, Dad called after me. His voice cracked. Wait, I stopped. He looked at me with something I hadn't seen in a long time, humility. I was wrong, he said quietly. About you. About everything. Mom was crying silently. We let pride make us blind, she whispered. I swallowed hard. I don't need your apology, I said. But I do need space, real space. Then I walked away. That was the last real conversation we had. A few weeks later, Jason's company officially collapsed. His investors backed out, and the local bank froze his accounts due to the fraudulent filings. I didn't say a word. I didn't post. I didn't celebrate. I simply moved on. Months passed. Seasons changed. And one afternoon, I found myself driving through our old neighborhood, past the house where we'd grown up, where everything had started. The new owners had repainted it. The old oak tree in the front yard was gone. It didn't even feel like home anymore, and that's when it hit me. Home isn't where you grew up. It's where you grow into who you're meant to be. I wasn't that little girl anymore, begging for love that came with conditions. I was a woman who built herself from the ground up, with or without their approval. Later that night, as I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea, I scrolled through my old photos, birthday dinners, family vacations, moments where I was smiling just to hide how small I felt. And instead of anger, I felt gratitude. Because without those moments, I wouldn't have learned self-respect. Without their favoritism, I wouldn't have developed independence. Without their betrayal, I wouldn't have discovered my strength. I whispered to myself, thank you for breaking me, because it forced me to rebuild stronger. That night, I deleted Jason's Facebook post from my memory the same way I deleted his number, permanently. But fate has a funny way of testing your peace. 6 months later, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten. The return address? My parents. Inside was a short note from Mom. We've moved to a smaller place. Jason isn't speaking to us anymore. We understand if you never want to see us again, but we think of you every day. Thank you for opening our eyes before it was too late. And tucked inside was a small photograph, me and Jason as kids, sitting on the front porch, both laughing. For the first time in years, I didn't see rivalry. I saw innocence. That's when I finally realized sometimes revenge isn't about payback. It's about walking away so they can see themselves clearly. Because the best revenge isn't destruction. It's becoming everything they said you couldn't be. 2 years passed before I saw them again. By then, my life had changed in ways I could have never imagined. The business I'd built had grown into something real, not just profitable, but purposeful. I was helping other small entrepreneurs who, like me, had been told they weren't good enough. I had a quiet apartment filled with warmth, plants, and the kind of peace that money can't buy. But even with all that growth, there were still moments, quiet, late-night moments, when memories came rushing back. The laughter before things fell apart, the way Mom used to braid my hair, Dad teaching me how to ride a bike in the driveway. The good parts were still there, buried under all the pain. So when I got a call from an unknown number one morning, I almost didn't answer, but something told me to. Hello? There was a pause. Then a soft, trembling voice. Hi, sweetheart. It's Mom. I froze. She sounded older, weaker, like the years had taken their toll. Mom? Yes, she said quietly. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but your father isn't well. We're at the hospital. Those words hit me like a punch to the chest. What happened? He collapsed yesterday, she said, her voice cracking. It's his heart. The doctor says it's serious. I didn't think. I just grabbed my keys and drove. When I got to the hospital, I hesitated outside the door. Through the window, I could see them. Mom sitting by Dad's bed, holding his hand. He looked frail, pale, like a shell of the man I remembered. Mom looked up and saw me. Her face lit up, but tears filled her eyes instantly. You came, she whispered. I nodded. Yeah, I came. Dad's eyes fluttered open, and for a second he just stared, like he couldn't believe I was there. Then he smiled faintly. Hey, kiddo. Something in me broke. I sat down beside him. Hey, Dad, we didn't talk about the past, not yet. We talked about simple things, how my work was going, how Mom had taken up gardening, how the food here was terrible. It felt almost normal, almost peaceful. But then, as the nurse came in to check his monitors, Dad reached for my hand. His grip was weak but steady. I've wanted to tell you something for a long time, he said. I was too proud before, too stubborn, but I need you to hear it now. I looked at him, waiting. You were never a failure, he said softly. We failed you. We let our fears make us small. You just wanted to stand on your own, and we punished you for it. I'm sorry. Tears filled my eyes before I could stop them. For years I had imagined this moment, hearing the words I thought I'd never get. But when they finally came, I didn't feel anger or satisfaction. I felt peace. Thank you, Dad, I whispered. That's all I ever wanted to hear. He squeezed my hand once more before closing his eyes to rest. I stayed there for hours. Mom and I talked quietly, like two people learning to speak a language they'd both forgotten. There were long pauses, awkward smiles, moments of silence that said more than words could. She told me how things had fallen apart after Jason's business went under. How they lost friends, how they sold the last of their old house to pay off his debts, how Jason eventually cut contact altogether. He blamed us, she said. Said we never pushed him hard enough, that we made him entitled. Maybe he was right, I sighed. He made his own choices. You can't fix what people refuse to see. Mom nodded slowly. And what about you? Have you forgiven us? I thought about it for a long moment. I have, I said finally. But not because you asked. Because I needed to. She started crying again, this time out of relief. That day turned into something I didn't expect. Not reconciliation, not a fairy tale reunion, but understanding. A quiet truce between who we were and who we'd become. Over the next few weeks, I visited them often. We laughed about old stories, went through photo albums, even cooked dinner together in the hospital's family kitchen one evening. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And one night, as I walked out to my car, I realized something beautiful. I no longer needed their validation. The child in me who used to beg for their approval had finally grown up. Now I was there not out of guilt, but out of choice. Dad recovered slowly. When he was finally discharged, I helped them find a small apartment near a park. Nothing fancy, but peaceful, warm, filled with light. We started having dinner every Sunday. Sometimes Jason came up in conversation, but not often. I think we all knew that chapter had closed. One evening, Mom handed me a small box. Your grandmother's bracelet, she said softly. I was saving it for you. I should have given it to you years ago. I opened it and smiled. It wasn't about the jewelry, it was about the gesture. The acknowledgement. Thank you, Mom, I said. She smiled. Thank you for coming back. A year later, I stood on stage at a women's business conference, sharing my story, not the revenge, not the pain, but the lesson. I told them how I'd grown up chasing approval that never came, how I'd learned that family can love you and still hurt you deeply, and how sometimes the most powerful act of revenge is forgiveness. The room was silent as I spoke the final words. You don't have to wait for someone to see your worth. You can decide you're enough right now and build from there. Afterward, dozens of women came up to me, sharing their own stories of betrayal and healing. I realized that what I went through wasn't rare. It was just rarely talked about. And as I walked off the stage, I felt that deep, unshakable peace again. The kind that doesn't come from payback, but from release. Months later, I visited my parents again. Dad was sitting on the porch reading the paper. Mom was tending to her flowers. When I pulled up, Dad smiled and said, "Hey, kiddo, you look happy." "I am," I said simply. We sat in silence for a while, watching the sun dip below the trees. The air was warm, soft, golden, and for the first time, everything felt right. Not because we had erased the past, but because we had accepted it. I finally stood up, brushed off my jeans, and said, "You know, I used to think I wanted revenge. I thought making you regret your choices would heal me." Dad looked at me, curious. "And did it?" I smiled. "No, forgiving you did." He nodded slowly. "Guess we both had some growing up to do." I laughed softly. "Guess so." As I drove home that night, I rolled down the windows and let the wind hit my face. No anger, no resentment, just gratitude. Because in the end, revenge fades, but peace lasts forever.